Okay, so I don't know how much space I have on my camera phone here, but there's one thing I wanted to talk about. My stepfather himself, he was adopted. And the shit that happened to him within the adoption system was fucked up, okay? And I totally sympathized about this with him previously. And I've even, when I forgave him about certain things, I've tried to explain to him, because he was hurt, the reason he does and still continues to do certain things. I tried to make so many excuses, but he has failed to do his own inner work. So all I was doing was not helping at all, really. I was just making it worse, unless he wants to learn the lessons himself. There are some men out there that have been traumatized and they've had every emotion pretty much stripped from them. So when it comes to certain things that trigger emotion, like what happened in their trauma, the only thing that stirs up that kind of emotion, that's what they want to run with, to feel alive inside, to feel the spark inside. So even if that means being, let's say, with the opposite sex, because that's somebody who molested you or did anything to you, or even if you're confused about that sexually or whatever it may be, that particular trauma triggers an emotional response, which is a chemical released in your brain. So if everything else has been stripped away from you, you've been literally ripped of your joy. Nothing you do, nothing you say really brings you happiness except maybe trauma and pain, especially when it comes to the sacral chakra and stuff like that. And that's the only thing that really triggers you or gets any kind of chemical release. That in itself is an addiction, okay? Because it means you've searched for everything around you to give you any sort of stimulation. And the only thing that will is your own trauma. And if you haven't even looked at it, analyzed it, or even done any sort of shadow work to heal from that, that will continue to be your lesson. And you will continue to be addicted to that one chemical, whichever chemical compounds are released based off of the trigger from your own trauma. So if you were in the adoption system, or you were orphaned or anything like that, and you were abused or you were molested or anything like that, and that's the only thing you can connect to, because in that sort of system they do a lot of brainwashing as well, and they do a lot of stripping you of everything. So you're easily manipulated, so they can use you kind of like a vessel, and they can get you to go in whichever direction and make whatever choices and decisions, because you're predictable, because they've been able to get into your psyche. So they can base your moves, like a chess move, based off of your own trauma and use that against you, which is really fucked up if you think about it. And if you refuse to heal or go within to look at that, because it's very painful, then you will make decisions based off of your trauma, based off of your addiction to that chemicals that's released, strictly in accordance with what traumas you experienced in the past. And that could be detrimental to yourself and other people around you. And if you're not a happy individual and you get pleasure out of stripping other people from their joy, that's because somebody did it to you. And not necessarily did you allow it, but a lot of the times, you can be a fighter and fight back. It's a lot easier said than done. I know from experience. But what I'm seeing right now is some individuals that they still are running off of old programming and still refuse to heal because it's so painful, are continuously fucking shit up for the rest of us. And it's really upsetting, because you want to have sympathy, you want to have empathy for those people. You really do want to be able to just relate to them in some way, or talk to them to let them know that they're not alone, that they can work through this sort of thing. But when they do things to retaliate against you or sabotage you in any way, or do things to hurt you, it makes it really hard to keep constantly forgiving a person and not holding them accountable for their own fucking actions. It makes it really difficult to say, you know what, it's okay, I'll give them what they want. I'll just let them do whatever they want, even if it's at sacrifice for my own well-being, my own peace, my own things that I've accomplished in my life, or I'm trying to keep together, that I have created for myself. If they just want to keep taking from me because they haven't healed anything within themselves, that's not fair to me either. And so it becomes like this battle which is silly because it's just based off of unhealed shit. Because if you're also triggered, then that means there's certain things you haven't healed either. So there's a few things I've been working through, especially when it comes to the ego, and the full understanding is there. Like I really did sit down with both of my mom and my stepdad, and I even told them, no matter what happened, I forgive them, and I genuinely meant it. But when they continuously coming at me, I had to pull my energy away. I had to separate myself, because then that's me allowing that behavior, and it's me subjecting myself to that sort of torture, and I didn't want that. But the fact that I pulled away my energy made them come at me even harder, like a billion times harder than before, because they're still stuck in that cycle. They still haven't learned the lessons. So they still believe that in order for me to come back to them, they have to strip me of everything, or they have to strip you of everything in order for you to be codependent on them so they can feel some sort of comfort, which is not okay either. It's very unhealthy if you think about it, but I completely understand. I personally was not in that system of the adoption agency, but I did go through every form of abuse and trauma you could think of. Physically, mentally, emotionally, verbally, you name it. And I do understand, and I can empathize, and it's easy for me to forgive somebody, but when I constantly keep forgiving somebody over and over and over again, or I keep giving in, or I keep allowing them to take from me, or I keep allowing them to even siphon my energy, you know, when you meet a person and they're all hyperactive and then you leave and you're like, wow, I feel real energized, you know, that person's such a nice person. They're so happy-go-lucky. You know, some people that angers their demons and they're pissed off. They're like, oh, why are you so fucking happy? And then other people, they're like, wow, I just got like a boost. You know, it's amazing how energy works. But there's some people who will sit there and do nothing, and they'll constantly siphon off of you, and then they'll blame you for it because they're still fucking unhappy. And then meanwhile, you're still working your ass off, even though other people may not think you're working hard because they're struggling. And then they constantly keep taking from you, and you want to play like the card of being, you know, civil and nice, but at some point you got to stand up for yourself too, because if you don't, then you're allowing that behavior and you're not holding them accountable for shit. And they're just going to continue going through that cycle over and over and over again, whether you're in their general vicinity or whether you're far and separated from them. It doesn't matter. They're still going to have to go through it. That's their lesson to learn. You could tell them till you're blue in the face. You could give them information too. Me, myself, there's still stuff I'm learning. But they have to realize it on their own, just as I had to realize certain things too. But you can also communicate so that we all fucking learn together as a collective, so that it won't be such a struggle. Because there's hurt people pulling the fucking strings right now, and some other people aren't even aware that they're being used to sabotage or target other people. Like literally, like a vessel, like a puppet. They're making decisions based off of their fucking traumas because they're addicted to certain chemicals. They don't even realize what they're doing to harm another individual, and then they're blaming the other fucking individual for their choices. And me, myself, personally, I found myself almost being lowered in my energy, just because I get my own inner child wants to play too, and it doesn't want to be fucking picked on. So I play their stupid little games, and that just lowers my vibrational frequency. That's all it does. It just lowers me from what I currently was. I was vibing fucking high. So there was no reason for me to be doing any of this childish bullshit, to ever even think that I needed to counteract something. But I will defend myself. I will stand up for myself. And part of that is documenting all this stuff, so I can look back on it later too. Because I bet you some of the videos I watch later on, I'll be laughing. It's a process we all have to go through, and I understand it. And I would love to forgive everybody around me. And I've forgiven myself. I love myself enough to put my boundaries down, to respect myself, to do things for myself, to make sure I'm healthy, taken care of, well situated. I'm doing these things for myself. I'm not expecting it from anybody, and I sure as fuck am not expecting anybody to fill any empty void in my overall well-being. I'm not expecting anybody to do that for me or seeking anything from anybody else, including comfort. And I'm not going outside of myself to get any of that. I am searching within myself, and it's still a process. So I completely understand, but I will put up my boundaries, and I will speak my truth, and I will stand up for myself, especially when it comes to people trying to fuck with my peace, thinking that it's the other way around, that their peace is disturbed when they didn't have peace to begin with.